everyone, PushingUpRoses here, and let's talk wish fulfillment. Now, there's a few ways to define and approach this term. In psychology, it was coined by Sigmund Freud and is discussed in his book, The Interpretation of Dreams. Ah yes, Sigmund Freud, the creator of psychoanalysis and obsessor of penises. His theory states that all dreams are the result of repressed desires and that the motivation of said dreams is wish fulfillment. Freudian theory also states that a person's yearning from the previous day while they were awake manifests in their sleep, and Freud also claimed that this happens specifically when we're young. To put it simply, dreams are supposed to help people with unresolved conflict due to having subconscious desires that maybe you're embarrassed of. Now, obviously there are some issues with these theories, as I had a weird dream about Bugs Bunny being chased throughout a maze by a pair of sexy disembodied legs wearing black stilettos as a kid, and I'm fairly certain that did not stem from any sort of repressed cravings, but for the sake of this video I can at least work with the idea of needing to feel out our wishes in some way. Basic human behavior suggests that we all need to find a way to achieve wish fulfillment, whether it involuntarily or consciously ends up in your dreams.
I got a whole big theory about it, you know. Different kinds of food make for different kinds of dreams. Now, if I have a ham and cheese on rye like that, I dream about a tall, cool blonde, sort of a first sacker type, you know?
What about liverwurst?
Dream about liverwurst.
Now, in fiction, wish fulfillment is defined a little differently. The trope is described as when an author of a written work includes outcomes that they personally want to see. Some people criticize this and say that it can cheapen the writing of a story, though it's not always bad. Sometimes the author will target a specific audience and attempt to provide wish fulfillment for them, though that can limit your audience since we all have such varying aspirations. Now let's discuss how this ties into my favorite medium for escapism: video games. It's pretty clear and understandable that people use video games to sometimes act out things they usually can't in real life. They can provide a lot of different ways to experience wish fulfillment, linear or otherwise. But for the sake of this discussion, I'll be mentioning games that offer some percentage of control. Just like in fiction, where writers can direct where the story goes and can conclude it to satisfy their personal tastes, game players can also write their own story in a similar way. In these games, we're the author, and for games that provide us a lot of flexibility, it can be very fulfilling. Sandbox games and simulators are probably the most successful at providing people with ways to live out your dreams, depending on how niche they are. A lot of people gravitate towards The Sims for a variety of fantasies because you play as a person, who can be a version of yourself or someone else, and you can basically just simulate the life you want to have. I think one of the biggest draws with this series, and I'm not saying everyone does it, but I have no shame in this admission personally, is creating all of your crushes, putting them in your game, and sexing all of them up. Hey, it's okay. I've done it too. We all have desires, and sex is one of the most coveted. It is mentally arousing to have someone forbidden, something or someone you cannot have, and now there's a safe and hopefully inoffensive way to do that. You can experiment with your appearance without changing anything permanently. You can pretend you're a self-publishing writer or a talented artist, and some people just like to simulate a life similar to their own. Some people find fulfillment in that. You can also have kids, to which I say, fuck that, I don't want to raise a kid in my fantasy simulation, thank you very much. Another wish people like to act out is being all-powerful. Games like Saints Row 4 are very indulgent when it comes to that. As you can see, I'm a very fit version of Robert Smith in my game, and I can glide across the world with all these robust punches and just be really weird in this fantastical world. And I like Saints Row because it doesn't take itself seriously, and yet it provides a lot of satisfaction. It's silly and frivolous, and those things are very much welcome to people looking for stimulus. And in a different type of all-powerful feeling, the Civilization games are fantastic. Sometimes I just want to sit back and watch the world burn, especially these days. There's something satisfying about creating entire cities, religions, armies, and so on. The best way for me to describe the feeling of getting wish fulfillment is to bring my own personal experience and preferences to the table as an example. You'd think my ultimate wish fulfillment games are murder mystery adventures because I talk about them ad nauseum, but my favorite role to assume is the thief class in the Quest for Glory series. I specifically found myself having a grand old time in Quest for Glory 5. My greatest satisfactions came from picking locks, carrying out the thief side quest, robbing my neighbors blind and doing it while they sleep in the other room, and don't even get me started on blackjacking these guards so I could rob the bank. Twice.
I was robbed last night. Well, that is, the bank was robbed. Thief cleaned out the safe entirely.
Despite doing these illegal things in the game, I was still playing to be the hero, still trying to save the world from death and destruction, so I got a double dose of gratification. Now, according to Freud, the reason I would be going for this in-game, going for this ability to steal people's precious riches, is because I have unresolved conflict. That does not mean that my conflict is the inability to rob banks. It just means I need something exciting to fill a temporary void as I march in this endless parade of anguish that is life. The spectrum of things we find fulfillment in is broad, especially within video games. Some people simulate life, some people simulate death. Some people want to be able to act out violent things without consequence, or it could be something as simple as wanting to manage a farm or even throwing a fireball. We all have different thresholds for what we consider enjoyable, and overall it's healthy. Even wanting to engage in more violent video games to de-stress, I do that on occasion when I'm pent up. And we all have a pointed interest in the forbidden, having sex with someone you can't have, stealing, beating someone up. Since childhood, we've had this curiosity towards the prohibited, and video games are such a diverse interactive medium. You can find things to satisfy almost any interest. I'm personally drawn to very dark content, at least what your average person would find dark, because again, we all have different thresholds. And I find myself playing what some people would call, quote, unfun video games. The kind that would cause people to blindly say,
"Keep this politically and socially driven shit out of my video games. Video games are meant to be fun."
But like any medium that provides wish fulfillment, video games should be, well, anything and everything, and for everyone. There is no shame in finding fulfillment in fluff, and there's also no shame in me finding fulfillment in the cat lady or sanitarium. I'm your target for those kind of games, and they've been a truly healthy way for me to deal with my ongoing issues. Because I am the type of person that embraces the negative and am comfortable with melancholy feelings, I find that my wish fulfillment relies heavily on catharsis, not just a high or an adrenaline rush. So at what point does this become dangerous or irresponsible, and how does relying on video games for self-indulgence affect us? When do our boundaries become compromised? Well, I was addicted to AOL chat room roleplay for about 6 to 7 years. RPGs are widely popular because you can play a character. People like to be in these exciting situations, and you can be anybody you want. You can be a warrior, a vampire, a great beauty, anybody in any setting you want. I used roleplay to grieve the death of my father and manage my depression, and it did work for a short time. But at one point, the unresolved conflict was being put on the back burner. When the high of the game stopped working, I kept playing. I had become addicted despite it no longer having a positive effect. I would play all night, hoping it would fix my broken life, but it never did because that's how addiction operates. It didn't matter that it wasn't working. It didn't matter that it caused me insomnia and exhaustion and depression. I just kept doing it, hoping it would work. Now, the odds were always against me when it came to addictive gameplay. I was susceptible. My father became an alcoholic after serving in Vietnam in the 60s, and I later became addicted to food and was diagnosed with binge eating disorder that later turned into bulimia. I also suffer from a specific type of obsessive-compulsive disorder, so I found it easy to turn to something game-like to escape from my problems. And I'm far from the only person to have gotten addicted to roleplay or video games. Felicia Day has been candid about her addiction to World of Warcraft, explaining that it wasn't the game's fault, but she was using it to fill the time between getting acting gigs and also to engage in these social aspects in MMOs. A lot of MMOs have addictive qualities, which theorists connect with reward-motivated behavior. This is kind of wish fulfillment in the very literal and physical sense. Games with built-in reward systems create a neurological reaction in your brain in which dopamine is released into the body. Just the very expectation of the next reward can be physically pleasurable. In Asian countries, video game addiction is a pretty severe problem akin to gambling addictions. Some people have become so obsessed they put their health in danger, with several fatalities documented. Like many vices, people who want to experience this wish fulfillment to such a detriment usually have pre-existing issues, though there is a lack of accountability when it comes to the media in general. For example, casinos are finding that people who play slot machines are over the age of 50, so to attract younger people, they are going to try putting video games in their facilities. You may also notice that certain digital slot machines are based on a celebrity or something from pop culture meant to target a specific demographic, unlike ye old double diamond machines. Similar to other things like alcohol not turning you into an alcoholic with one drink, or one McDonald's burger causing an addiction to food, a violent video game like GTA, let's say, will likely not turn you into a monster. but I do think that a violent person would turn to GTA to fulfill their own unresolved conflicts. It's food for thought. Our desire for wish fulfillment can be destructive or debaucherous with intentions that go beyond good, or it can be an intoxicating release necessary for people who need a break from the hardships of life. With the interactive nature of video games, I would argue that they are one of the most powerful ways to fantasize, while keeping in mind that the idea of overindulgence will be present as with any vice. Despite my previous addiction to roleplay, I find I indulge in certain games and benefit from the escape they provide me. Adventure games specifically have created some of the best times in my life, and yet RPGs have accounted for some of the worst. Behavior is complex, and rarely is something like wish fulfillment black and white. Even Sigmund Freud would tell you that. So I pose some questions for those watching. What are your experiences with escapism? How have interactive mediums like video games or roleplay impacted your life? Have you ever felt addicted to a video game? People often don't like to talk about their personal jonesings and desires and any kind of flaws they've suffered from that, but I think it's a conversation worth having. We could all stand to be a little more educated about what drives us as human beings. In the meantime, it's back to blackjacking security guards for me. Happy gaming! Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching my video about the benefits and detriments of wish fulfillment from video games. Phew, that's a sentence I don't say very often. If you want to watch more content by yours truly, check out the annotations and tell me all about your hedonistic ways on social media. Links are in the description. As always, I will see you guys in the next one.